Welcome to Abbeville County, South Carolina. A wonderful mix of relaxed southern charm, 21st century industry, and an unbeatable quality of life.
Abbeville was built on the backs of slaves. When you look at Abbeville history, people are going to talk about the Anthony Crawford story. Anthony Crawford is my relative. He was an African American hero. And I feel a responsibility to get his story out because I don't want him to die in vain. I was told Grandpa Crawford's story as a child from my maternal grandfather. My school was integrating in 1967, and he told me to not trust white folks so much because they lynched my great-great-grandfather. As I got to be a teenager and I kept hearing this story, bits and pieces of a story, and I saw a big picture of Grandpa Crawford in my Aunt Annabelle's home. Everybody else walked past that picture all these years. But I just said, he looks like somebody to me. He looks like he was somebody. And I really want to go find out who that was. I've always been kind of curious about things. I've always had a love for history. His picture looked dignified to me. And we were held to some sort of standard that he had laid down. Entrepreneurship, education, those things that Anthony Crawford believed in has come down through the family lines. He also said, the day a white man hits me is the day I died. And that's literally what happened.
Yes, this is it, my hometown. The place we as members of this community call home. We built it with civic pride and remain proud of its dignity and friendly, tolerable character.
Abbeville has not healed. The Crawfords have definitely not healed. Because of the way Anthony Crawford lived his life, I think that, he needs to be recognized as a true hero of Abbeville. So I really wish that there were a monument built to him right there in that square, where everything else historical is. Then put Anthony Crawford in there as well. The first time I went to Abbeville, I was terrified to go down there. And I often wonder if other family members who were raised in the North and had never been to Abbeville. Because you hear that, what happened to him that day. You don't know if there's still Ku Klux Klan down there. You don't know how Abbeville feels about you coming down with reporters all the time and exposing what they've swept underneath the rug. So, you just kind of worry about your safety. Is this where I obtain a permit?
If you go to this corner directly and go down the sidewalk, there's an Ace Hardware store, and then the police department is the next building. It's the police and fire complex.
Okay.
You'll probably see the big fire trucks.
Thank you. I saw that Anthony's father had helped found a church, Cypress Chapel AME Church in Abbeville, and so I called directory assistance and got the phone number for Cypress Chapel.
I don't know what drove me to get up and come to church about 45 minutes early. I arrived at church about 9:20. Service started approximately 10 o'clock. And about 20 minutes to 10, the phone started ringing. And I questioned myself, who could be calling this time of morning? Because nobody's normally here this time of morning. And I answered the phone, and it was Doria, tracing her roots. And we've been in touch with one another ever since. Doria is my second cousin. Her name is Philip Crawford, and I'm the great-grandson of Anthony Crawford. Anthony was the cornerstone of the family. One of the few educated people, much alone black people. One of the very few that could read and write in that time. And that said a whole lot, especially for the black race.
As prominent as he was, I wanted to find out how he got there. Philip also knew that I was interested in kind of reconstructing what happened to Anthony Crawford and what happened to the family. So he gave me the name of an historian from the area and said that he knew a lot and he'd probably be very willing to help me. So I called Dr. Ware.
The Anthony Crawford story is one of the main things I think that happened in Abbeville. And I found a lot of little articles in the paper, usually saying what a successful farmer he was. I mean, bales of cotton, how many bushels of corn, and the things that he brought to town.
I see Anthony's father with 50 acres of land in the 1880 census. It's 15 years after slavery ended. Oral history says is that my family never left. All they did was start buying land close to where that plantation was. Whether there was sharecropping or something involved, we don't know. They had knowledge to grow land, which was pretty powerful. And they must have been good businessmen and paid their bills on time and savvy enough to have the right kind of contract, because that's how a lot of sharecroppers got caught up. And when Anthony's father died, some of that land was sold off to Anthony. He was president of the Black Masons of South Carolina. He was owner of 427 acres of prime cotton land.
He knew how to take the land and live off the land. He owned everything he needed to live on his farm.
The newspapers used him as exhibit A of how blacks could be successful.
I asked myself, do they really know the meaning of that flying that flag? They say heritage, but for white people, heritage means one thing, and for black people, heritage means something else. This is the home place, Doria, where we originated from.
That's where we were slaves at?
We wasn't slaves here. Anthony was always free, and he grew everything he needed on this place and had everything he needed to repair his equipment, mill his own corn,
Made his own syrup.
flour,
Right.
raised his own hogs, raised cotton, had his own buggies to transport his goods, had all his animals, knew them by name, and they was obedient just like the family.
So it's a powerful thing to step where they stepped. But it's also a sense of pride to know that they did something with it, you know? They just weren't working for someone. They were the employer.
You stop and look back over life, and you realize from whence you've come, and it makes you have different emotions at different times. When you know how you had pride in the early 1900s and owned your own land and equipment, and how it was taken from you, it gives you a bitter feeling also sometimes.
I was fascinated, and I wanted to know everything I could about him. And I figured that I'd opened up a can of worms that would probably take years to get some answers to. But it was a labor of love because it's my family member. Is this where I obtain a permit?
Yeah, I don't know if we do that here or not. Let me find out. I'll be right back with you.
Okay, thank you.
No one's available right now, but I know you don't get the permit here. You go right there on the square to the right where the Opera House is. Go inside the door and it'll be your first door on the left right there. We've never issued one here, and I've been here 28 years.
He was a man who successfully, with his relatives, farmed cotton and insisted on fair market price for his cotton. He was a man as well who insisted on paying fair market price for cottonseed. He expected to be treated with dignity and would tolerate no assault upon his person.
That pride is something that obviously Anthony Crawford had, because he's supposed to have said he'd die before he let anybody beat him. Had he been willing to be beaten, why, he would have lived, of course.
My father knew Anthony Crawford. He had heard rumors of how much he was worth. $25,000, which was even big money then, certainly. And for whites, for a black, to be that prosperous and to have that much land, they just simply couldn't take it.
Evidently, he lived under constant threats. I'm convinced, after doing some research, that Anthony Crawford was not going to die a natural death, as far as some of the white citizens of Abbeville were concerned.
He was resented because of his success. He resented because of his attitude.
He used to go down to the river and just start throwing seed and some of the other fruits of his labor into the river and say, I'll throw it away before they take it from me.
Anthony Crawford took his bale of cotton.
Him and two of his sons come to town that morning to sell their cotton.
He went into W.D. Barksdale's store, stood in that line with the other farmers, and when Barksdale offered him a lower price for his cottonseed than he offered the rest of the farmers, he said, "Give me my damn cottonseed back."
The merchant said, "You can't do better than that." And Anthony Crawford replied, "You're a cheat."
They went after Grandpa, and he backed out of the store. And I heard he put his foot in the door and said something like, "At least I got my money through hard work and not marriage."
The merchant told some of the rednecks, nigger baiters, nigger haters, that Anthony Crawford called him a cheat. And he called the sheriff. He called my father. And at that point, my father tried his best to get Crawford to leave the county for a few hours, for a day or so, just get out of town. This thing will pass over. Crawford refused to do it.
So he was arrested for cursing a white man.
Put him in jail. Foolish thing to do.
The mob overtook the jail from Sheriff Burt's, and they went to the top of the stairs and drug him down.
Mob chased him from down here in front of the courthouse, up this side of the square. He ran up this side of the square, headed to Barksdale's store. That's where he was captured at.
They beat him, stabbed him, and tied him to the back of the buggy and drug his body through town.
They had intended to go out and hang him on a pine tree and riddle his body with bullets. But he was probably dead before they ever got to the pine tree.
The city manager's out of town. His assistant should be back after 2. Most likely, if you get permission from them, then they'll have to go before council so that they can approve the closing of maybe one side of the square.
Right.
And then if there's any other streets involved, he said you would have to talk with the highway department.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
But no one should be back after 2. Okay, and he'll be in this office right here. You can just ask Miss Wilson to talk with him.
Okay. Thank you.
The attack on Anthony Crawford was not only an attack on an individual, it was an attack on an entire extended African American family, and in a sense, an attack on the African American family system.
I started to know that Anthony Crawford's not in just 1 or 2 books, he's in dozens. And that what happened to him is cited as a reason for migration, which I guess I didn't realize the historical significance of his life.
Because what followed in the months after the lynching, as if the lynching itself had not been horrific enough, was a curious alliance between the local white elite and local relatively poor whites to forcibly disperse the Crawford family from Abbeville County.
After the lynching, the family got word that the rest of the family was going to be killed.
I remember hearing Mama say that the news got to them out in the country that if anybody showed up or said anything about the killing, they was going to kill them too. So that's why they were in fear. And they stayed, in the woods, kind of in hiding for days.
His sons had to get in front of the old homestead, jump up in the trees, and they were given guns by some of the white citizens of Abbeville to protect themselves.
Basic history, what you learn in school, is that a lot of bad things happened in the South, that there was a lot of violence, racial violence, that there was hate and fear, but you don't learn all that much about the economic consequences of it or the economic impetus of all of this violence.
Blacks owned 15 million acres of land as of 1910. Today, blacks only own a little over 1 million acres. The loss has been extensive.
The family strayed in all different directions. Some went to New York, some went to Chicago, some went to Philadelphia, and other parts of the country. The conditions we had to scatter under was devastating.
I can remember hearing Mama say something about, well, you know, all of y'all was so afraid, didn't nobody try to look in to get nothing that belonged to him, you know. So it just seemed to me that because of that fear, that nobody tried to get the money that was in the bank, or that the white folks just took the plantation and whatever.
We're here for a family reunion.
All right.
What we're trying to do is trying to find all of the family members who were scattered, and we feel as if it's time for us to come home and be one. And every year we get more and more people, so I think it's important that we try to come here as often as possible, and especially the children, because we're not going to live forever. So we want our children to be able to see Abbeville and know exactly what their history is and their place here in Abbeville history. They're welcoming the knowledge. You know, everyone knew that they had this ancestor who did this and this happened to him. But I don't think they realized that because of what happened to him, Black people in the South did not feel safe, so they left in droves. I don't think they knew that. So I think, sure, anytime you learn a little bit more about yourself, that it's a good feeling. Ready? Crawford! These are Anthony Crawford's grandchildren. This is Dolores, that's Aunt Jessie's daughter. Cousin John, that's William Wesley's son.
I can think back some of the things my mother told me when I was little about how her father got lynched. And for that reason, I think we never were allowed to come back down to Abbeville.
And she just didn't want to talk about this. Was such a painful, traumatic experience for her, the lynching of her father, that she never really talked about it. I personally think it would have helped her heal better.
My mother graduated from Bettis Academy, and at that time, few African Americans graduated from a school of higher learning. She was very proud, very independent, and the incident was so traumatic for her that she had to be on welfare. This was a reality for us.
I guess it was too much for them to talk too much about it to us. Now, I don't know if they would talk about it to somebody else, but we didn't get in a conversation with me and my father about it.
They were in shock and trauma most of their lives. Literally could not talk about it. So we don't have a lot of oral history. And that's what made me have to go research and look.
We're just so glad to have you folks here. And it's just a collection of Abbeville memorabilia or Abbevilliana stuff. Things don't change a lot here sometimes. Some do, some things, thank goodness, change for the better, and some things don't.
They have a room where they have distinguished citizens of Abbeville, not a Black person. And as far as we're concerned, he was very much a distinguished citizen of Abbeville. And his picture should be up there with them, as long as some other prominent Blacks, I'm sure.
This was the jail?
This was
Upstairs was the one for the more
What they call
hardened.
the ones that were afraid of.
This was open in 1916?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So this is where they took him from then?
Right, I would think so.
Because they described bringing him down the stairs. Any references to great-great-grandfather's lynching here in the building anywhere?
No. Not at all.
Is there any reason why or why not?
No.
Can we submit material?
Certainly.
It's part of Abbeville history?
Yes. That's a part of our history.
They need to rewrite the history of Abbeville because it's really not complete without Anthony Crawford and the Crawford family in it.
Over 10 years I've been working on this, and I really wanted the world to know, to have it exposed. Now, I agree with Ruth. We've been told that we can't have a monument outside of the square because this is sacred ground, where our forefather was sacred to us, and his likeliness and a tribute to him should be built right here in the middle of the square, because you're right, it is a part of Abbeville history. We didn't write it. It just happened. My life would have been totally different had he lived. And so when you talk about me, and I know that I have hundreds of, kinfolk now, all of us were affected. We don't know what kind of prominence that Anthony Crawford or the Crawfords would have had in the southeastern part of the United States had he lived. I would like to see the state recognize what happened. and erect a historical marker. And you see historical markers up all over the place about different events in history.
Well, I can get you in touch with the right people, and I can be sure that we can get the right people. I don't think we'll have any problem with that.
Okay.
Because this is really something we want to get done.
And why is that?
The more we can make closure to that part of our history, and when I read what your great-great-grandfather put in the paper, he had enough money, and it cost some money. And when he put this statement in a local newspaper, and I'm going to read it to you. And can you imagine if this was done today in United Nations? And this is what he said. And it will be the highest endeavor of our lives to strive to make as good citizens in the future as we have in the past. Those who opposed and differed with us, I have nothing but a friendly feeling for individuals as well as nations, sometimes different. But it is me and right to settle their differences legally and amicably. A citizen, Anthony P. Crawford.
A 100 years ago, a man named Anthony Crawford, a strong man, a faithful man, but because he insisted on fairness, a lot of people didn't like that he was doing well. They didn't like that he could sell food and cotton to white merchants. And one day when he was being confronted by someone who wanted to buy his product for less than was fair, they actually arrested him because they couldn't allow a proud, strong, prosperous black man to stand up for fairness. And that wasn't enough. A mob of 300 people came to the jail to pull him out. A trial wasn't going to be good enough. And they took this man out of the jail, and they actually dragged his body through this community. And then they took him to a spot, and they weren't content to just beat him. They weren't content to just hang him. They shot his body 200 times. When the family, the grieving family whose descendants are here today, just wanted to reclaim their grandfather, the people in control said, no, we're going to let that body hang there for a few days, just as a statement to all the black people in this region. And that family had to flee, and it was an injury. It was a burden. It was an assault. And today we are here to give voice to that hardship. But more than that, we are here to give witness to the importance of what can happen when we come together and say, I'm here. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do to be truth tellers, to be witnesses for justice, is to gather in a place like this and say, I'm here. This marker is a story about hardship, is a story about bruising and cutting and suffering. But when we get together, when we say we are here, when we join together in truth telling, we turn those cuts, those bruises, those scars into medals of honor. This is the most honorable place in Abbeville, South Carolina. We are here.